Hi folks, Wes Penny here. I'm just going to do a video on my resin chironomid pattern. A few people have asked. So I'm using a Arex 540 FW 541. It's a curved nymph hook, and this is a size 10, which sounds huge, but it's equivalent to about a size 14 in Firehole 718. So it's a little bit on the larger size for chironomids, but definitely size appropriate. So I'll start off with my bead. I'm using a black and white chironomid bead from troutbum.ca. But if you use your black bead or white, or you want to tie in gills, just go ahead and do that like you normally would. And then we'll start in behind the bead. So I'm going to just start my thread right behind the bead. Give it a bunch of wraps so it's in there nice and solid. I'm using a power thread from Textream. I like it because it's very strong, and it also allows me to flatten it. Because one of the things you want to do on this is your body needs to be quite uniform all the way, because you're not using material to build your taper. The resin will be the taper, so we want to keep the body slender right through the whole shaft of the hook. So after we get our thread started, I'll turn the hook over, and I'll use a piece of small black wire, so it's the small size, and I will tie it on the bottom of the hook. So just get it started and straighten it so it's right in the bottom. Sorry, give me a second here. One of the reasons I like to do this is it keeps the bulge of the wire away from the sides, but it's also, when we do the finishing resin at the end, that wire is important for a bit of a ridge and a V on the bottom side, and you'll be able to see later what I mean by that. So keep your thread flat, counterspin it as often as you need to. If you hold your wire straight up towards the jaws of your vise, it will just basically follow the hook and stay mostly in the middle. So go all the way into the bend as far as you like to go. Stop right about there, and then we'll move the hook so it's just hanging down like that. And then I'm going to use some clear tinsel. This is Unimiler tinsel, clear, in the size number 14. Yeah, you can use just about any tinsel. If you don't have the clear, use pearl or whatever. But the 14 is a good size. And when you cut it off, it'll have a bit of a curve to it just from the spool. And you want to use that curve. So tie your tinsel in right where the wire finished. Just do a couple of wraps. Make sure it's right even on the top, so it follows the hook like that. And then put maybe 3 wraps to hold it in place. And then you can move it if you need to. And then I'll pull it back and put a couple of wraps right in behind. Now for the body, you can do just about anything you want. Whether you do thread or tinsel, however you like to do it, just remember that you have to keep everything flat. So I counterspun my thread. I'm going to go right back to the bead. And I'm going to do this one in a copper and gunmetal. So I'm just using the normal Flashaboo, tinsels that everybody has. I'm going to tie the copper and the gunmetal in together. Just catch them both in. Get them nice and flat. And then take it all the way back. You can see my thread is nice and flat. So by the time I do all this, I've really added next to no bulk onto the hook. And you can go right in to the base of that tinsel and then come back up. Another thing that's important is to keep everything flat and your wraps nice and close together. because the smoother the body, the easier it is to wrap the tinsel. Come right back up and put in a whip finish. Get my hook straight. Okay, so I'm going to take the gunmetal first. And I'm going to wrap it all the way up. You want to be as close in your wraps as possible. I'll tie that off. Trim it. Another whip finish. Okay, then we'll grab the copper. The copper is basically just your complementary color. You know, if you have your kind of your copper ribbed chironomid. And I'll do a couple of wraps at the base just to make it a little bit more solid of a color. And kind of once I get to that, then I'm gonna space out the wraps. Want them reasonably close together, but still let the gunmetal shine through. Again, you can use your thread and do your thread blending, you know, if you're doing red and green or black and red. That's where your kind of your own options come in the body. Just always remember to try and keep it really, really slim. Okay, so now that I've got that, I'm going to take the tinsel and we're going to bring it ahead. Oh, sorry, I have one other step here. You want to build up the thread right in behind the bead. So this has to get built up to where that's almost as high as the bead itself, because that's basically your ramp for the tinsel to rest on at this end. So just wrap a whole bunch on there. And it'll all make sense towards the end. But that, well, it's going to be your thorax, wing buds, whatever you want to call it, will be there. But so we're almost at the top. Then I'll bring the tinsel, kind of hold it, and I'll do 2 wraps. Make sure that it's straight over the back. And there's only 2 wraps in there. So you're going to take a bodkin or a needle or something and put it underneath the tinsel and lift it up. I'm just going to rotate it sideways a bit here. If the tinsel kind of moves a bit, you can just straighten it and kind of get a nice body. You can pull it ahead a little bit. I'm just going to make that a little smaller. There we go. So you definitely want it to be higher at the bead than at the bend. And it's almost better not to have anything shown at the bend. But that'll give us something to work with here. Then I'll put in 1 more wrap. And you just want that to hold. You don't want that coming off when you're rotating your vise. So I'll use some Raid Zap thick clear resin. If you can see that. Rotate your hook so it's on its side. And you're going to put your resin. What I'll do is I'll squeeze my resin to get those top air bubbles out. And then take it, and I'm going to just let it go right on the side of the hook. So it's kind of between the hook shank and the top of the tinsel, and go all the way down. Then you can take a needle point if you need to and just kind of clean it up a little bit. But generally, you just leave it like that. And then you can see if you turn it over, it just kind of bleeds its way to the other side. So just let it do that until it's kind of even on both sides. You have lots of time to kind of play with this a bit. And when it's kind of even, then you can cure it. So just let it hang, cure from the top. And you're going to hold your light there for a pretty good length of time because you got quite a bit of resin to cure. Okay, that should be good. Now, if you make a bit of a mess and there's lots of resin on top of the tinsel, what I like to do is just remove it. But if it's nice and smooth, you can just leave it and then just cut this bit off, and then you'll cut the tail off. You can just leave it. But if you want, you can just unwrap, undo those 3 wraps, lift the tinsel up, and just give it a pull, and it'll come right out. So it's out of the way, but you've got a really nice, smooth, and clean body on the top. So again, we'll put in a couple of whip finishes here. So I use my rotary vise a lot when I'm doing this. I'll take my wire. I hold it in hackle pliers just because I find it easier to kind of grip and keep control of. So then again, we want to get our 7 segments, which is normal for the chironomid. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can actually maybe just space those out a little bit better. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's a little bit better. And then I'll tie my wire off, and I try to get it underneath just so it's clean. There we go. Okay, so that's pretty much done. So then take your thread and just build up your thorax here. I mean, you can add wing buds at this point if you wanted to. So they use some biots and have them hang down. I don't really worry about them too much. But you want to build that thread up so it's kind of even with the body. Then we'll just whip finish that. And that's basically the body of the fly done. Cut off your thread. And then I'll use a marker. So I use Copic markers, or any markers will work as long as they're alcohol. So this is a leather, what do they call it? E39 leather. And I'm just going to dab that on the white thread. Try not to get it on your white bead. You have some time to scrape it off if you do. And then we'll mix this color with some resin at the end to kind of finish everything off. So now we're ready to put the resin on the top. If you saw in one of my earlier videos, I showed you how to mix resin and ink from an alcohol marker, just using a piece of tin foil and put the resin on the tin foil, dab your marker next to it, and mix right away. So you can get your green, red, black, brown, whatever colors you want. But I do have a video on my YouTube channel as well showing how to do that. So I've mixed some black, and I like to use black for the top segments. It's going to take a bit. I only take I mean, it's probably not much more than a pinhead size, like very, very little. If you use too much, it just becomes really hard to kind of manage it on top of this. So just do a little bit, and you're going to dab it against the wire. So you don't want it to go over the wire, and you don't want it to touch the wire ahead. So I'll just dab it a few times, try and get a little bit over the ridge of the resin body, and then move on to the next one. When you're doing this for the first time, it's probably easier to do 1 or 2 segments at a time and then cure it. I'm getting now where I've done it so often, I know how much time I have and how the resin moves, so you actually have a lot of time to be able to do it. Put some there, do that one. So the trick is to use less resin as you go down, and that'll keep your profile. If you have more at the bottom, then it just doesn't look right, so use more at the top and less at the bottom. But at the end of the day, they're usually pretty even, so you want it to be just a little bit higher at the wire, and that gives you that raised kind of appearance. So I've done 4 there. I'm going to cure it. Then you can move your hook a little bit, give you a little bit easier access to get into this bend. We'll put a dab there and a dab there. Smooth it out a little bit, go off to the side, not too much. And then the last, I'll show you one other thing here. Okay, so I'll cure those. So at the very end of the body, where you tied the wire and stuff in, there's a little bit of white thread. So if you want to put in some red in there, you know, for the red butt, or, you know, we can go back to that leather colored Sharpie and put that in there, and it actually, against the copper, it looks a little bit red, and I'm going to actually put a little bit up into the copper, and that'll give me, I mean, it brightens the copper flash blue quite a bit. And then we'll put a tiny bit right on the base of that. And it can go down both sides. That's that. Make sure everything's good and cured. When you're adding ink to the resin, you want the ink to be reasonably transparent. If it becomes too dark and too solid all the way through, it won't cure properly. So it needs to be transparent so the light, the UV light, can get right through it. So, you know, you can make colors pretty much as dark as you want, but you got to be careful that it's not too much. Okay, so that's the top and the tail done. Then I'll just go back and put it upside down, and I'm going to take smaller amounts. I'm going to do one right at the brown here, and that's kind of the start of the bottom of the body. Cure that one. And this is kind of where that wire tied in on the bottom side of the hook, so there's a bit of a ridge there. So when you add these tiny little drops, and it just enhances the segments, just makes them stand out a little bit more, then you're just going to put it right on the top of that wire. and you can draw it down ever so slightly on the sides. And really important to use a very, very fine needle point. Your bodkin won't work because it's too thick. I'm using a tool from Stonefo, just because it's just about perfect for doing these, and it's got the blade on the other end. But the needle tip that they put in these is so fine that it's really handy for doing this. But you'll have a real tough time getting the resin in if you're using too thick of a bodkin. So basically that's done. And I'll cure it. There's one extra step. This is not that important, but it's something you can do, and that's taking a very fine, I use Raids Up Super Thin, and I'll put a very thin coat just along the side, kind of where we've just done those bottom segments. So that's really the only part on the fly now where the tinsel's not completely covered. So just by doing this, don't put a lot because you don't want it to kind of take off or take over the bottom segments that you did. But just enough to cover a tiny bit. And we'll cure that. Okay, and one final step. So we're going to do more resin, but I'm using that leather Copic ink. And basically my resin is the same color as the head here. I'm just going to go all the way around. And always use less than you think you're going to need. It's easy to add more. It's difficult to remove it. And then I'll try and get the top to be just a little higher. And cure it. Give this just a bit more time just because of the color, and make sure you go all the way around. It also gives the rest of the body a bit more time as well under the light. And there you go. That's it. That's the resin chironomid that I've been tying, and I tie them a lot just because I just really enjoy doing it. But it's got a pretty nice profile, and I think when it's in the water it'll look great. I've tied them as small as a size 18, which is doable. I've done one in a 22, which was quite difficult. But if you were to do it in a 16 and 18, kind of standard chironomid sizes, they'd look great. Anyway, there you go. If you're interested, you can follow me on Instagram at Flame Lily Flies, or the same on Facebook, Wes Penny at Flame Lily Flies. Thanks very much.